Real Talks are focusing on boundaries, the book by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. And the subtitle is When to Say Yes, When to Say No, to Take Control of Your Life. And this book came out 20 years ago. I have read it several times myself. I have given it to many people as I've tried to help people in pastoring who had boundary issues, didn't know how to set boundaries. And the funny thing about this is now that I'm looking at the material again, I'm just thinking every day how I see boundary problems in the situations that I deal with. Even this week, I've had 2 situations where I've been trying to help people and they're clueless, about boundaries and when to say yes, when to say no. And so last time we covered some things, actually just a summary. The book of Genesis is the seed plot of the Bible. A lot of times all the great doctrines of Christianity are in the book of Genesis. They're in seed form. And God adds revelation onto a particular doctrine as you go through the scriptures. Like, for example, boundaries is right in the first chapter in the creation of man. Remember, God said, let us make man in our own image after our own likeness. Let him have dominion over the fishes of the sea and the fowl of the air and all these things. In chapter 2, it says he places him in a garden and he charges him to cultivate it and guard it. Now, he was created to have dominion over all the earth, but he was only given immediate responsibility in a sphere called the garden. In other words, and there's such a lesson in that. God did not give him immediate responsibility for the earth. He gave him immediate responsibility for the garden. And one of the things we need to remember, that's a principle. And remember last time I talked about how Paul used the term measure or sphere. He said, I don't get out of my sphere in ministry. He said, I don't go try to correct the other churches, but I'm your father in the spirit, so I'm correcting you because I was the church planter of this ministry. See? So, and I've always applied that to myself. I for many years, and there were exceptions, but very few, when people would come after a service and I'd never met them. Hey, I'm visiting your church this week. I was here last week and, I really like what you're preaching and I need some counseling. And my first question was, well, who's your pastor? I mean, obviously they're new and sometimes they would say, well, I've just moved here. Well, that's fine. I'll meet. Or they would say, yeah, well, my membership is over at First Baptist. And I said, well, you need to go to First Baptist, to get your counseling. And now some people would think that was really not being very pastoral. Well, Pastor Ray, aren't you a pastor? If somebody comes and asks you for counsel. But see, I'm not responsible to give counsel to everybody. I'm not everybody's pastor. I'm only the pastor of the people that God puts in my sphere. And so if I'm going to try to help somebody, how do I know that what I tell them is not different than what their pastor has already told them and they didn't like what he told them? So now they're going to come down and see if I'll tell them what they want to hear. So if we honor boundaries, that's showing respect for the other pastor too. This is your responsibility. Now I have a responsibility to love them and I could pray for them, but I don't get pastorally involved because that may involve giving them guidance or correction, and that's not my sphere. Everybody okay? All right. So we talked about that as a principle last time. And the notes that I sent you this time are on the 10 laws of boundaries. And this is so good. We will not cover all this tonight, but we're going to get into it a little bit. And it's interesting, we're in the Sermon on the Mount and we're going through the section on the law, God's laws, God's commandments. And a law is something that has been set in place by God and it works all the time. Now think of the law of gravity. Okay. It works all the time. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you like it or don't like it, or, especially when you get on the scales and gravity is pulling you down harder than you want to be pulled, but it works all the time. And God has set laws into his creation that work all the time. And there are laws regarding boundaries. But people that come from dysfunctional families, Cloud says, don't have a good understanding of boundaries because God's ways and boundaries have not been taught them when they were growing up. There's, if most people, if you say, or would you say you grew up in a functional or a dysfunctional home, or mostly functional, mostly dysfunctional? I won't take a show of hands, but over half usually say dysfunctional. My home was more dysfunctional than it was functional. If you're not taught, I had a situation today where I'm dealing with something that, people say they're Christians, and I'm trying to help them, and they don't have a church or a pastor, but it's like, here you are, you're breaking God's laws all the time. You don't have a pastor, you don't have a church. How do you know you're saved? How do you know? And they grew up in a church going home. I'm going like, what are the parents teaching? Because just because you go to church doesn't make you a Christian. If you're in a garage, that doesn't make you an automobile. You can't, as we've been saying, that's why it's so important to know these kind of things as we get married, as we raise our kids. Train up a child in the way that he should grow, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. The illustration on that I always remembered was when we were in Arkansas, the front yard needed a tree. So I went down and bought a sapling, at the nursery, and we got it planted. It was probably only about 8 feet tall and just a sprig, But after about 3 months, I could see it wasn't growing right. It was kind of like growing this way.
I wish I had had a picture of you planting a tree.
Well, why? So you could prove that I did manual labor?
It was cute.
Well, it was growing crooked. So I learned I had to go out and get a wire, a guy wire, pull the tree up, get it taut, rub the stake in the ground, pull the tree up. And after about 6 or 8 months, I was able to take the wire off because the tree is straightened out. That's kind of the way God showed me is raising children. All children tend to grow crooked. So, but the younger you catch them, the easier it is to fix it. Because if you let a tree like that grow for 10 years, you're going to have a hard time putting a guy wire on it. I don't know where I got all that, but.
I don't know.
Okay, laws. Laws work all the time, whether you know they're working or not. One of the laws that in Genesis 8, there's 4 laws that God said as long as the earth remains, they'll continue. You know what they are.
Seed time
and harvest, summer and winter, heat and cold, night and day. God says as long as there's an earth, these are 4 laws that always work. And the interesting thing about those laws is that 3 of them we don't have anything to do with. God says we're going to have heat and cold. If you like cold weather, how many of you like cold weather more than warm weather? How many like warm weather more than cold weather? Okay, well, it doesn't matter what you like because you're going to get the other. It doesn't matter. It's like if it's hot, don't worry, it's going to get cold. If it's cold, it's going to get hot. If it's night, it's going to get day. Doesn't matter what you think. You say, well, I'm a night person. Well, I'm a day person. Well, every 24 hours, you're going to get one of each. Because that's the way God ordered his creation, okay? It's laws. But the one we get involved in is sowing and reaping. It's the only one of the 4 laws that we have involvement in. We actually participate in sowing and reaping, right? It's a law, but God allows us to enter into its operation. Well, that's right, because we're sowing and reaping whether we know it or not. That's right. That's exactly right. And Galatians in the New Testament says, be not deceived, God is not mocked. What you sow, you will reap. Now, when God gives us a law like that, he's not punishing us or fussing at us. He's telling us this is how things are. Okay? See, a lot of people think God's laws or commandments are just designed to take all the fun out of life. That's not true. God has woven things into his creation, laws that work. And he tells us those things actually because it's the way to a good life, is flow with his laws. They work for you. Flow against them. As you said, you're sowing and reaping all the time. Need to sow good things. But when it comes to boundaries, what does that mean? Okay. Let me summarize the story. And this is similar to the story we had last time, and it's so good. He tells a story of a 25-year-old man named Jack who still lived at home, and his parents were taking care of him. And he didn't look for a job except here and there. He was dabbling in drugs. He was writing hot checks. He was really just very irresponsible.
And kicked out of college, good schools. And
Yeah, they kept putting him in good schools. He'd get kicked out. They'd go find another school for him. And so those people came to Dr. Cloud and said, well, you know, we need help with our son. He's got a problem. And after they told him what it was, he says, I agree with your son. Because why isn't he here? He says, well, he doesn't think he has a problem. And Dr. Cloud said, I agree with him. He doesn't have a problem. You have the problem. The problem that he should have is to reap the consequences of what he's sowing. Lazy, irresponsible, undependable, unfaithful. See, that kind of sowing will reap consequences that are painful. But because the parents didn't have good boundaries, they interrupted the law of sow and reaping. He used the example of the law of gravity. Okay, say I bump my glass or I bump this Bible and it's starting to fall, but I catch it. Okay, I've interrupted the law from working. In a good way, of course. But with that, the parents are interrupting the consequences of his actions. And as a result, he feels no pain and he has no motivation to change his behavior. That makes sense? That is exactly what happens in all codependent relationships. He says here, bottom of page 1, just we interfere with the law of gravity by catching a glass tumbling off the table. People can interfere with the law of cause and effect by stepping in and rescuing irresponsible people. Rescuing a person from the natural consequences of behavior, their behavior enables him to continue in the irresponsible behavior. That is a breaking of the law of consequences because there's not a sense of proper boundaries, right? And what I've learned about people is as long as you enable them, they'll let you. They will. A lot of people will just let you take care of them. And so what I see, the mistake that we made as parents, and the mistake, maybe we weren't as off on it as some, but we have tried to help people so many times, and we get into situations where their kids, they're just doing everything for their kids. And sometimes it's more of a temptation for people that are wealthy to spoil their kids because they can literally cushion any blow. Like these people, when he flunked out of one school, they just went down and get him enrolled in another private school, you know. Yeah, well, that's...
I still think the best little analogy was the thing I shared about the caterpillar. That spoke to me so much when I heard that. It was a minister I heard, and the preacher was just saying, don't try to prevent the struggle. Because if you try to prevent someone from struggling through and you get in there and you interfere with the process and try to prevent them from, that they will die. I mean, not necessarily physically, but it'll just do something to them that they won't recover. And when I heard that story, I mean, it so spoke to me. And I thought, how many situations of just people that I know, beside family members, but that when you see them going through a hard time and it's like you get in there and you try to be God for them, and I will fix you, because you just, we don't want to see anybody suffer and go through hard times. But when you get in there out of your sphere and try to fix a situation God never called you to fix, I mean, you're just thwarting the plan of possibly of God in their lives. And that has been a real flaw with me, is trying to fix everything. And, and really what you're trying to do is be God in someone's life. Let me take care of this for you, and you can't take care of it. But that caterpillar thing really spoke to me. Don't try to prevent the struggle. That little caterpillar, it turns to the butterfly, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, the thing is created he needs that exercise to get strong enough to survive.
We try to prevent that.
And he uses in the book, he used the illustration of a bird getting out of the egg.
Trying to break through the egg. That's right.
Yeah, they need that struggle.
That's God's design. That struggle is God's design.
But see, we don't like to see anybody struggle.
I'm a rescuer, and I think most pastors are rescuers by nature. There is something in a pastor that has a rescue mentality, I'll save you.
You rescued me. You always said I rescued you,
Well, you were worth the effort.
That's what I was, but
there was a friend
you are a rescuer.
Yeah, I think, and most pastors are, and I think there's a part of that that's righteous. But I was thinking about many, many years ago, a friend had committed adultery and had been sidelined from his ministry for a season, and to get help and restored. And the story that I was getting was that he was being misused, he was being harshly treated, and something in me, because I'd known this guy, I said, that ain't right. That pastor needs to, he really needs to be compassionate with this guy. This guy's got a ministry. I believe God can restore him. So anyway, long story short, I go to this other city and talk to this pastor and told him where I disagreed with the way he was handling the situation, and come to him, and the guy says, well, I'm just gonna move my family down to be with Pastor Ray. So they came here, and we loved them. But I want to tell you,
should have left him alone.
I should have left him up there where he was, because honestly, I got him down here, and he was a nutbag. I mean, it was just, a lovable nutbag, but he was crazy. And honestly, here I am now with all my other stuff I've got to do, and I've gone out here and gotten this guy.
Rescued him.
Yeah. Well, I didn't actually try to make him move, but I kind of knew that would happen. But I just look back on that. It's so embarrassing, because what kind of a spirit was going on in me that thinks I can do a better job than this other?
Who knew him better than we did.
Pastor said, thank you, Pastor Ray.
Well, he did not like or agree with what happened when he, came here. But boy, I'm telling you what,
it was a mess.
And I've seen that happen. That's not the only time I've done similar things to that. But there again, guys, you've got to know what's you and what's not you. You got to know what's my responsibility and what's not my responsibility. And if I see someone, even if I love them dearly, struggling, I need to have compassion. I need to love them. I need to pray for them. And he doesn't talk about this much, but I mean, if someone doesn't have food, I mean, I can't just let somebody starve. But I have learned to set boundaries on my help. So I'm going to let him move in with us. And I'm telling you guys, alarm bells start going off I'm going like, now wait a minute. You have to realize you and your wife have a little kingdom entity called a family. And you're responsible for that, okay? Now, we should be hospitable. And if you've got someone who needs a roof, you offer it, but you set a limit on the beginning.
Yeah.
You be generous. Say, look, we'll take care of you for a month. You can stay here, but you've got to get your own place. You can't just stay here. And I want to tell you, not 1 in 10 takes that advice. People open their home, let people come in. I mean, they're eating the groceries, they're using their car, using the utilities. Don't offer to help, don't sweep the floor, don't do the dishes. And then they're back in 3 or 4 months, miserable, complaining to me. Well, he doesn't do anything to help. He's just got all these problems. I say, you got the problem. Because what he's doing there, the behavior that he's doing there is the behavior that got him without a roof. So what you've done now is you've taken him in and you've gone beyond. Remember the Good Samaritan? That's the perfect, okay, here comes the Good Samaritan, okay? Now he sees this guy beat up on the road. The religious people have passed by him. And he goes and he pours in the oil and the wine and he helps him. Now that's godly. That's doing the Christian thing. But notice he sets boundaries. He takes him to the inn. He gives gives the innkeeper some money. He says, now, when I come back, if it's more, he owes more than this, I'll settle up with you. Meaning, it's over. You get it? It's over.
After he's healed up.
I'll give him time to get healed, and I'll take care of the bill. And if it's more than what I'm giving you here, I'll settle up. But I'll settle up. That's a boundary. God, we need that, guys. And I want to tell you something. This is not just for you. This is for your disciple making. Because every one of you is going to have a friend, maybe a family member who's not going to know this stuff. And at some point, you're just going to have to be able to help them and say, do you understand boundaries? When Jesus said, how long have you been in this condition? He says, I have no man to help me when the water's troubled to help me get in. And this is America today. It's just blaming. I have no man to help me. I'm in all this trouble and nobody's helping me. It's an entitlement mentality. It's here you are, with not taking responsibility because in your mind you're blaming someone else. Like that person you help, when you put your foot down and drew a boundary, then she blames you as the problem.
She ended up at that original place that we tried to get her out of in the first place before she moved.
Well, that just tells you spiritually she didn't grow at all. She didn't pass her test, So God lets you take the test over and over again if you don't pass your test.
Yep.
I'll tell you one other thing that comes to mind over the years. We've always had, when the church was large, we had a benevolence fund and we had a benevolence committee because there's always needs. Everybody's needs something. I mean, who wouldn't like their electric bill paid or, $500 grocery gift card? And people have legitimate needs. And there are times when churches need to help people, But here's the thing that I noticed as a pattern. When we would help people, not all the time, but probably at least half the time.
More than that. 9 times
I said
out
it
of
at
10.
least half.
Say 9 times out of 10.
When we would give people money to help them, just a benevolence, I'm not talking about, just a gift, because we knew there was a need. Those people never stayed in the church.
Mm-hmm.
They went to another church to do the same thing. Yeah, that happens a lot.
They just would leave and would go.
They want to take their ministry to another church.
Or do you
Well,
think,
let me tell you what would happen in and I'm saying eventually. I don't mean I don't think these people I'm talking about were the kind that you're like they just go from church to church and no. I'm talking about people that had been with us for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I don't just throw $500, $1,000 to people if I don't know them, because they could be. There's so many con people. We had the church on Old Hickory and Granny White. We had so many people stopping by, knocking on the door of the office that we had to just tell them we don't do any benevolence. We had a policy. I think it was $10 at the gas station. If they were out of gas, we give them a $10
groceries,
or $5 for groceries.
No,
If they
more than
weren't
that.
having anything, but we say, you come back to service on Sunday, we'll get you in touch with our benevolence committee. In other words, we had boundaries. You come to church, and then we'll do this now, because we don't want to send you away hungry or really needy, but small. But if you come back, but no, I'm talking about people that had been there.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't know, not half of them left, but I noticed, and they didn't leave right away. What happened was they became more and more distant. And here was the most interesting phenomenon of all. When I would get, and it was almost like the bigger the benevolence, the weirder this was, or the more sure it was going to happen. When we gave somebody a benevolence, they would start to avoid me. I'd be coming down the hall and I'd see them coming, and then I'd just see them, they'd duck in the restroom or, go the other direction. And it was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And we mentioned it in staff meetings. We said, what's going on with so-and-so, And it took me a while to make the connection that, why is it that the people that we give the benevolence to begin to avoid us? And sometimes after a while, we don't see them anymore. Okay, here, and then I read one of the books, I think was it Chris Valentin or somebody?
I don't know, but that's so true.
Yeah, embarrassment.
But
He
it wasn't
said-
it. Well, it seemed like it was something else. It wasn't embarrassment.
It was low self-esteem.
I can't remember what it was. Can't.
I think it was.
He didn't feel worthy of it.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah.
In other words, in his own soul, he didn't have enough self-esteem to sustain that kind of a gift without feeling obliged. And so, boy, when I read that, I said, that's exactly what happens. Yeah, he got the pastor got the revelation to put in his book from his own experience. Because, well, I might as well tell the story. He was teacher at the Bible school. And the head of the Bible school called him in one day and he said, one of their students loved you so much, they wanted to give you a special personal gift to bless you, because over the school year, you blessed them so much. And so he opened up he just said, I pulled the check out just a little bit. And he said, I pushed it right back and I said, who would give me $3,000? And he said, you need to look again. And it was $30,000. $30,000 to him personally. So then he started feeling awkward around this person. And he noticed that he was avoiding the kind of contact he had had with this person before they gave him the money. And then God gave him the revelation, because he asked God, why am I, what's going on with me? And then God showed him. And when he showed him that, then he understood why the benevolence thing works that way. He felt unworthy, right? So anyway, that's a little off base with the boundaries thing. But People that don't experience the pain of their bad decisions have no motivation to change their behavior. And so while that's where the boundaries have to balance. Okay, when can I should be compassionate, but then I have to have the wisdom to know where the boundary is, and I'm not helping them get out of the cocoon. They need to suffer the consequences before they change their behavior. The Bible tells us it's worthless to confront foolish people. Proverbs 9:8, do not rebuke a mocker or he'll hate you. Rebuke a wise man and he will love you. So codependent people bring insults and pain onto themselves when they can't confront irresponsible people. So if you can't confront irresponsible people, then you're going to end up feeling bad about yourself. This is the sad thing about it. You end up resenting the very people that you tried to help and are now taking advantage of you. And now you don't even love them anymore because they're being so jerky, you know. I think when we break God's laws, even if we don't know what's going on, we just don't feel good about ourselves. And I think we get miserable in the situation. And when people abuse your goodness, it's so unjust, but we don't know how to process it because we've got this idea, I've got to be Jesus to them, or I got to be a Christian. And so we put a lot of weird stuff on ourselves. Well, I have to tell you, after 35 years of ministering to business people, how many owners and managers have come to me with problems with employees who go to the church and who were just not responsible and not doing their job and grieving, say, I probably need to fire the guy, but somebody needs him to have a job. Pastor, I don't know what to do. And so they have all this. So that's a good time you have to talk to people and say, you know what, just because you're a Christian, because people will put you on that trip, some Christians, honestly, they feel like if they can get a job working for a Christian boss, they got it made. Hey, they really do. And they abuse maybe subconsciously, but they abuse their privilege of working for a godly person. We should not work for man, but as unto the Lord. So the New Testament says, whether you're working for a heathen or whether you're working for a brother, you do all you can do. Well, sometimes the best employees are heathens.
That's right.
That's true.
It is true.
Dennis Peacock used to say we need to, Christian business owners need to have a hire the heathens club. Go hire the heathen, because if you can fire them without feeling guilty. But a lot of times they outwork the Christians, which is so, that's such a reproach, When you use the word responsibility, the second law is the law of responsibility. And I want to spend the rest of our time on this one. And then when we come back, we'll pray about whether we want to go on. But because you can read this part, but I think there are some things that we might want to cover in a real talk. Problems arise when boundaries of responsibility are confused. We are to love one another, not be one another. We are responsible to others, but not for others. And by the way, I hope some of you are having some thoughts on personal experiences that you've had that you can share with the group so we can all get blessed. But we can all feel like we're not the only ones that... I think of the story of Eli, who was a priest. He was the high priest of Israel in the book of 1 Samuel, right before Samuel grows up and becomes the high priest. Eli's sons, the Bible says, were not good men. They did not serve the Lord, but they were priests. So here you have these two boys who are now men, and they're taking more out of the pot than the priest should take. He was the high priest. He had two sons. They were lying with the temple prostitutes at the door of the temple, taking more than they should out of the offering, and their father didn't do anything. And when God finally confronts him and says, I'm going to judge you, that one of the things that he says in 1 Samuel 2:29, he said, you have honored your sons above me. So here's the problem. God holds us responsible for our sphere. And these boys were grown men. So if they hadn't been priests, once you've raised your kids, I mean, they're responsible to God for their lives once they're on their own. But it's because he was a priest and his sons were priests, and he didn't correct them. And I've seen some really ugly things go on in churches where men won't correct their sons. And I remember one in particular where a situation where a son divorced his wife. He had an affair, divorced his wife, married again, and was still in the same church. And the idea was, we're grace, And not say you kick people out, but I'm just saying if there's no consequences, again, you're responsible for your sphere, your sphere of influence. And God will hold you accountable. And you're not responsible for people, but to people, but not for them, what they do. I want to wrap this up, but I think we're making the point that when you interrupt the law of sowing and reaping, you actually allow people to continue in behavior you don't like. And if you don't operate in your sphere of responsibility, God will hold you accountable. And not every area is your area. As I said earlier, I don't try to correct people from other churches. I mean, that's the pastor at that church needs to do that. And I don't need to try to, put myself in a place where I'm, I was thinking about our neighbor here. We have this tree here. It's in his yard, but it just grows over our driveway. And several years ago, the tree, the branches got to hanging so long and low that you couldn't pull our car in her SUV without hitting the branches. So I just went out there and, started cutting. They were hanging on, I can't get my car in the garage. Well, he let me know that he didn't appreciate that. He said, it's my tree. I said, well, it's my driveway.
But he said you should come to me and I will trim it.
That's right. But I'm trying to say it's a boundaries thing. Okay, it's his tree, but it's my driveway. So, we had to. So when I didn't think, because it's my driveway, I felt like it was in my sphere to cut back the offending tree. Okay. But he thought because it was his tree, it was only within his boundary to do any pruning to it. So when he came over, I did him a favor, but he explained when he came over that there's certain way that you cut back a tree that keeps it healthy, which I didn't know. I'm out there. What the heck? To me, it's like, get rid of the branches. I don't know anything about it.
There's an art probably that.
Well, I sure didn't know anything about it.
Many times we've seen churches where the pastor puts the ministry, the church, before the family. And the wife begins to resent the church. The children begin to resent the church because there's no boundaries. And then the church, the family's just lost. And it's, and then then the wife will struggle with, boy, it's hard to be in competition with God because, he is putting the church before us, before me. Boy, that's sad to me, and I've seen that a lot. Then the wives withdraw. They want nothing to do with it, and but you've never done that. There's always been a boundary there that
I think so.
That
Wisdom and having under shepherds too to carry some of those problems.
Well, there again, the
Yeah.
Bible says, to qualify for an elder, you have to have your home in order. So the home has to come first.
yeah.
Your marriage has to come first. That's your qualification to be in the ministry. But listen, once you see this revelation about the importance of this, you'll begin to see it in so many ways. In your marriage, in your friendships, in your job, as it relates to your family. I was just thinking about, over the years, marriages get in trouble over finances. There's fighting over finance, over sex. Sex is another big one. I tell you, the last 10 years, that just the increase in men involved in pornography, Christian men, and they get kinky. And then first thing you know, I'm sitting there talking about things I don't want to talk about with people. Because to me, I'm old school. I mean, what you do in your bedroom, I don't want to even, blah, 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 I mean, honestly, and if you go back and look at 35 years of, probably 5,000.
I feel like I'm under
sermons.
your armit. I can't.
That's where you belong, darling, right there. Just stay in your place.
I'm just like I'm right up.
I don't. It's been
that
fashionable the
close.
last few years, especially in some of these churches that really try to do felt need stuff. They do series on sex on Sunday morning. There was one church, big church, thousands of people. And they said, our goal, we're going to take this next whole month and we're going to talk about sex from the Bible. And he gave an assignment to the married couples. They had to have sex like at least a certain amount of times a week. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm telling you the truth. I don't have the details.
I think it was.
It was like every day for a month, and I'm going. Well, sex is crazy anyway. I have these young girls come in. They're griping because they're not married. We want to get married so we can have sex, and then they get married. And 10 years later, they're griping because they have to have sex. Yeah, it's like, but
How
no.
do we get off on this?
Because I think boundaries, when I have gotten into those awkward situations, I say, look, here's the thing. The husband has the right to the wife's body. The wife has the wife has a right to the husband's body. But there is a place where your skin is you, and outside of that is not you. And I don't care if you're one in the spirit or not, if there needs to be boundaries, you need to make them clear. And they need to be respected.